I don't just think of Kabbalah or Sufism or certain medieval trends and Christianity as being the spiritual trends. I mean, there is, good religion is built on a foundation of spirituality, and there are profound spiritual moments and experiences that people of faith have every day in their churches and mosques and synagogue. These are important traditions in that they realign our senses, but they're not alternatives. They're not necessarily more spiritual. They're just different.
The focus is different. The focus is basically on the essence of the message, as opposed to how high should I wear. But how high.
Although they do tend to have rituals of their
But I think that again, in my very humble opinion, I feel that it is the combination of the two, the dogma and the spirituality, which actually brings us to the final message. Because one without the other doesn't seem to be working. I mean, even in Sufism, the common belief is that, of course, you have to believe in the basic tenets of the faith in order to practice them, and then, make yourself a better person.
Absolutely.
And so this so-called, the goofy Sufi culture, while it's not harmful, is really not part of that understanding of the spiritual message, which, as I said, takes us back to the prophet.
Right, absolutely. So in the spiritual traditions, as I understand it, I mean, it's not like you are allowed to go away from the religious tenets.
Right.
It's just that you're interpreting them in a more tolerant, humanistic, universal, open way, as opposed to what we talked about, the fundamentalist aspect.
Well, let's get our focus even more aligned with the 20th century. I think there's been a great movement in reinterpretation of our scriptures with the whole rise of the women's movement.
Oh, absolutely.
To begin to see that these are patriarchal documents in many ways, and when we have female scholars begin to take a look at them, and this is certainly the struggle within Catholicism, has been a very patriarchal religion, and trying to move out of a feudal, male-dominated hierarchy and to see more universal and inclusive meaning to our scriptures, rather than just the male patriarchal
You
scriptures.
could be speaking for Islam. You're not alone in this, my friend.
And the role of the feminine, divine, and just the whole notion
Also,
of
but it's
creation.
interesting that when you go back into the history of these religions, there was a prominent female role, there. So you had bishops, you had rabbis, you had Bibi Aisha, women who were
we didn't have many.
authorities. But the tradition was there, and then somewhere along the way they were just pulled out.
Well, the Abrahamic traditions have been accused of being patriarchal. And
they were.
That is something.
But it was almost like it was hijacked into this sort of. It wasn't in the inception. It wasn't so patriarchal, but somewhere along again the
But in the
politics came into
spiritual
it.
part, again in Sufism, women have always been part of the Sufi understanding, and I don't know about Kabbalah, but have women been part of?
Not necessarily, but I do think there's a more sense of openness,
Yes.
and I think there's also, and this certainly contributes to the growing popularization of Kabbalah recently, is that there is more of a universal sense.
Yes.
I mean, Kabbalah, it presents itself as not just a Jewish teaching, although it develops out of Judaism, but it does present itself as a universal teaching.
And you have a lot of pop culture followers of Kabbalah.
As Madonna will say all the time, she's not Jewish, but she's a Kabbalist. And Kabbalah will allow for that.
How well is that accepted to say that you're not Jewish, but you're a Kabbalist?
I think within the mainstream Jewish community, people are not always comfortable with that, but within my understanding, and I'm not a Kabbalist, of the Kabbalistic community, for them, it's a non-issue.
Well, I think basically the idea there is that it's one religion.
Right.
There is no distinction.
It's very universal. What about...
well, the text that people, Bible scholars will be using now, is Galatians. There's neither male nor female in Christ. All are one. And yet we've had this incredible patriarchal religion, that it's seeming like in 1926 the United Church broke away and started ordaining, and then the Anglicans started ordaining, and now the Catholics, they'll be the last wall to fall, the biggest, most powerful religion in the world. It's hard to change
And although
traditions.
you have, and in Islam we concur with that, an example of Mary, Mother Mary or Mary
Yeah.
Magdalene, which are two most
Yeah.
powerful, instrumental, beings
For Magdalene, for sure.
surrounding.
Well, there have been strong women in all our traditions.
Absolutely.
The
Yeah.
question
Yeah.
of whether or not that patriarchy, I think again, the patriarchy has come through the politicization of the faith.
The defining thing in spirituality is also the concept of saints or sainthood. And so, how important are the saints in the different traditions, in the different religions?
Well, we own the saints.
Well, actually, we have quite a few of our own.
Catholicism, the last pope made more saints than all the popes together. But it's just a way
The
of,
concept of sainthood as
it's just a
opposed
way of saying, here are models.